Good day. Welcome to Stronger Vision Podcast. Today we have Sam Hojnowski on the podcast. She is an online trainer, but she didn't always want to be one. And so we have a wonderful story to tell you from her transition from being initially a very fixed mindset person, thought she was always just going to be overweight in the way she was, but then she learned that she could change over time. She could grow. I want to leave the rest of the story for her to tell because it's a really great one. And you're going to find out that she even gets into powerlifting and finds a new love for her life. So without further ado, here is Sam Hojnowski. Good day, Sam. How are you today?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Well, thank you. So I love that you've hopped on the show today. You're a fellow trainer online like myself. But what I'd love for you to do is to introduce yourself. I give a very rough, brief introduction, but I want you to tell your story. So I want you to tell the people and the listeners and viewers who you are and how you got into doing what you're doing now.
All right. So it's a long story. I'm going to try to summarize as much as possible, but I'm Sam. I am a coach online and in person for nutrition and personal training. So I mainly focus on strength, but I also coach some different types of athletes. So right now I'm training somebody for a half marathon. I've dabbled in running myself. I used to be a distance runner. And I also am a certified powerlifting coach. I haven't taken somebody to a competition yet, but I have done a couple powerlifting style programs for people. So that's something I want to get more into. How I got here. So this is a really long story, so buckle up.
Go into it. Yeah, I love it.
Basically, I always played sports as a kid. I started with soccer when I was in second grade, and then through high school, I played field hockey, lacrosse. I was always active. I always loved to ski, hike, all of the active things. But I never felt like an athlete. So I would play all these sports, but I was never that good at them. And I realize now that I had a very fixed mindset. I was always gifted in academics and I was in a gifted and talented program. So I thought that like these things were like a God-given thing and you couldn't necessarily develop an aptitude for something over time. So I always just thought, like I was overweight. I thought that, these other girls, they were thinner, they had more aptitude for sports, and that's why I wasn't good at them. So it wasn't until I got to college that I realized that you could actually train for something and become better at something. I always thought I was just never a runner. And I had this friend who lived on my floor in college who he ran in high school, he ran cross country, and he asked if I wanted to sign up for this 5K with him because we played intramural soccer together. So we signed up for this 5K. I realized I really liked running. It really helped me manage my stress and anxiety. And then from there, I got super, super into running. I trained for and ran 2 marathons, but I just kept getting hurt because I really didn't do much else. I would do a ton of cardio, barely any strength. I tried to do different, YouTube arm toning workouts, but I had no clue what I was doing. And then finally, I went to physical therapy because I had this persistent nagging pain in my hip and in my anterior tibialis. And my physical therapist was like, you need to be doing strength exercises. So I finally started going to the gym. I started doing strength exercises. And I just totally fell in love with the world of strength training. I felt really cool doing that. I felt great about myself. I felt so much less pain in my body. I was able to power through runs a lot better. And then basically the world shut down, didn't have gym access anymore. And I wanted to learn how to better strength train, even without gym equipment. So I decided to get my personal training certification in 2020. So at the time, I was just going to get it for myself, basically, because I was like, how can I learn how to do everything the right way? Like, how do I learn the methodologies behind it so I don't have to rely on another person to tell me what to do for strength training? How can I figure this out myself? How can I optimize? Because that's always the way that my mind has worked. I've always wanted to know the methodology behind things so I can design them myself. I think I should mention here that I went to engineering school, and at the time I had just graduated college. I was working as an engineer, and I was studying personal training on the side. So I did not think this was going to be my career. Anyway, so I got my personal training certification, and I was visiting my parents in Connecticut. I was living in Vermont at the time, and my mom's trainer approached me while I was sitting on, I remember it so vividly. I was sitting on the leg curl. One of the trainers my mom worked with when she went to personal training at the gym came up to me and was like, "Hey, I heard you got your personal training certification. Are you interested in using it?" And I was like, no, I think I'm just gonna use it for myself. I'm not sure where my life is headed right now. Like things are still pretty shut down because it was during COVID. And I just didn't think that I looked the part of a trainer. I didn't think that I had the capabilities to be a role model for other people because I didn't feel that great about myself. Um, and then basically like he convinced me that like you didn't have to look a certain way to be a trainer. I should pursue it. So I was in the process of figuring out whether or not to move back home to my parents' house. I decided to save money because I was working remotely, and I decided I was going to work part-time at my local Y as a trainer per this other trainer's suggestion and just see how it went. So from there, basically that just grew and grew until it got to the point where I was like, I can't possibly work as an engineer anymore because I have no passion for engineering. It sucks the life out of me. I feel like I'm doing that on the side with training as my main thing. So I decided to really delve into personal training in 2022 as my full-time career, and I haven't looked back.
That's a cool story. I'm glad that you walked us all the way through. There's a lot in there. I think you should be proud of that story. Especially like there's so many things I want to hit on. So the first one I want to actually touch base on because it hits home with me is like actually growing up overweight and having that mindset of not really feeling like you don't like your skin and you know it affects your confidence. You were kind of stuck in a fixed mindset. I think that's a huge thing for people to have to overcome. I think that makes us much more relatable to our clients that have that challenge of dealing with weight. So let's talk a little bit about what were some big mental moments for you? What were the best lessons you had? Because the way I look back at it is I was overweight as a kid, and it was, you know, the fortune in some sense that I was grateful for being overweight because I wouldn't be who I am today, right? So what were the big things, the big lessons, the big struggles you had to overcome with being overweight as a kid that you're now grateful for today?
So I definitely learned how to look more deeply in people. So like rather than just looking at somebody and being like, oh, that's a beautiful person, I search for other qualities because like I know what it's like to have people overlook me because of what I looked like. And now like I don't look at my clients who are overweight or struggling with their weight and like see them in a negative light. I see them as a human who has this one thing that they're struggling with. And I really feel like that is a huge asset to me because I know there are a lot of trainers out there who are honestly even borderline verbally abusive to their overweight clients. And it really breaks my heart that they can't see what these people are going through and how it's like, it's not that easy. Like, I guess if somebody's been a healthy weight or even thin their whole life, like they don't understand the struggle of it's not just like eat less, move more. There's so much more to it. And there's so many psychological and social aspects. There's so many things that have to do with your attitudes towards food, your attitudes towards yourself. And I feel like it's really given me a lot of insight into my clients who struggle with losing weight.
For sure. It's that insight and like you basically nailed it down. It's like people have a story. And if you're not, you know, exposed to the right ideas and the right influences, when you have the genetic disposition, there is genetics involved in being overweight and there's environmental factors. So if you have both the genetics and the environmental factors that aren't there to support you being healthy, then the probability is you'll be overweight. And so you're kind of get lucky with your influences. And as you mentioned, there's these people who are just completely ignorant of this concept. Say, oh, it's easy. Oh, it's easy. It's like that's the most ignorant thing you could say because you just don't know what it's like. And to having gone through it, I'm with you on the idea of like, no, it's tough. Even if you do know how to do it, stuff. Even when you do know the right steps, it's still tough to make it who you are because who you are currently it doesn't necessarily always fit that mold, right? You're trying to ask
Mhm.
someone to change their way, change the way they feel about how they eat. Changing anyone's like actual emotional state is a very difficult thing to do. And a psychologist can protest to that. It's never simple. So I really love that you hit on that everyone has a story, and it's so important that you listen to that story, you appreciate them as an individual, and you're able to have patience for them and trying to be compassionate for it. And I think that's what's going to make you a really great coach for sure. I'm
Mhm.
very fascinated with how you pulled out the term fixed mindset and how you had that transition, because that's a really important thing for people to appreciate, the difference between fixed and growth mindset. Can you go in
Mhm.
a little bit on that in terms on how you really just transitioned? What was the eye-opening moment, or the things that evolved your way of thinking from coming from a fixed to a growth mindset?
So some of it was honestly just education, like learning that there is such thing as, building muscle. Like you have the ability to change your own life. So for anybody who might not be familiar, fixed mindset is going into situations with this idea that, this is the way I am. This is just how it is for me. Growth mindset is if I work really hard, if I change things, I have the ability to make my life what I want it, basically. Um, and I think that fitness definitely helped me develop a more growth mindset in every aspect, because for the longest time I thought, like people are born with certain talents, and you can definitely make things better. Like you can study and learn more about, you can learn more about a subject, but I didn't necessarily think that, if you're not quote unquote a runner, that you could become a runner by running more and training in a certain way. And learning about things like, specificity, like, if you lift heavy weights, you're going to become more of a strength, like you're going to become more talented in strength, like stronger. If you run more, you're going to become more of a runner. Like the way that you train influences the way that you perform. And that is definitely, a growth mindset in play.
Yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
training basically teaches you that you can grow. You can grow who you are, you can change who you are, and it is the most important lesson for every human to learn. And I do believe that that is one of those exposure elements that if you're not exposed to at a young age, you get fixed. A lot of people,
Hmm.
and I feel like a lot of people who deal with obesity and in the world today are just in a fixed mindset because they just, this is the way I am. This is the way I've always been. And so they don't want to change, because the farther you go down the path, the deeper it feels. And the deeper and
Right.
deeper and deeper it feels. And so you become more and more fixed in that idea. And even if you're overweight, people tend to be just fixed. The older a person gets, the more fixed they become. It's, you
Hmm.
can't teach an old dog new tricks. And I think you can teach an old dog, an actual dog, but an old person, that's really hard. It's harder than teaching a dog, because people become so fixed of generations of just their old school beliefs. Like trying to convince your parents to eat more than one egg these days, that's a pretty hard thing to do.
Yeah.
And so when you get just so fixed on things, it's the worst thing for you. But growth, like you say, just, hey, you want to become a runner, start running. You want to become strong, start lifting things. And it's so valuable that you had that education, you went through that evolution. I'm really fascinated that you went through engineering too, because some of my friends went to engineering school, and that's some of the fucking hardest schooling that we had. The workload that engineers had, like the math problems, like the amount of studying, the amount of extra work that you have to do is so intense. And I would just love to hear just a little bit on how that was for you. And I would just look at it as like possibly character development. Like, how was engineering education and schooling for you?
It definitely was character development. It was, I definitely don't regret that I did it. I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about the world, and I was able to kind of like build myself like a stable financial situation after college by working in engineering for a couple of years. But that being said, I really do wish that I had chosen a major that I actually liked. This is kind of back to the growth versus fixed mindset. I really just thought that that's what I had to do to be successful, because I always had an aptitude for math and science. I always had great grades in those areas. And I thought that engineering was the clear choice. So I went to college, became an electrical engineer, worked in the field for 2 years. I was bored out of my skull every single day. Um, I I honestly would, so I worked from home and I would cry maybe 2 or 3 times a day. Um, and sometimes I wouldn't even know why I was crying, but like I felt like my body knew that that was not the path that I needed to be on. And I was just not a happy person at all. I just felt really disconnected from my life, and my only bright spots were when I would shut my laptop at 4:30 or 5 and I'd go to the YMCA and I'd coach people and I'd teach classes and I'd work out, and I would just like I felt like that was my community, my tribe, my safe space. And I had other trainers there who were so kind and such great mentors to me, still are actually. And I really just like feel like I blossomed into myself and learned about like growing as a person once I kind of got rid of this idea that I had to be an engineer to be successful and I had to be making a certain amount right out of college and had to be on a certain career path. And I mean, honestly, sometimes I go on LinkedIn, um, and I see people I went to college with and they're moving up. They're like senior project engineer, engineer three, engineer, whatever. And I get this little twinge where I'm like, oh man, like they're really making a life for themselves. And then I go back and I look at my own website and I'm like, I'm making a life for myself too. Um, I just think that having this idea that you have to be one thing and you have to follow a certain trajectory to be successful is so toxic. And it's definitely something I don't want to pass on to my own kids. Like I have been really vocal even with other youth. Like I recently spoke at a middle school career day, about personal training and how, there are a lot of cons to it. It's not very glamorous. It's not what people think it is. Like you're not like, training celebrities. Cause when I was younger, that was my only exposure to personal training, was seeing like the celebrity trainers. But I would talk about, the positive and negative aspects, but also the fact that like, people will have opinions about the path that you're choosing. People might look down on the low barrier to entry in some cases, but if it's what calls to you and it's your passion, then you should go for it and you should chase what makes you feel whole.
Couldn't agree more. That feeling whole is a really big thing. It's that passion, waking up with a purpose. And for you to go through that is so valuable to appreciate what you can have. And it also comes back to that fixed mindset, because you fell out of it, you grew out of it. So many people get caught in this career idea, and I've had it many times where I look at other people who are farther on financially, right? Like they're in these set career trajectories and working for other people and working other hours and making good money. And then I talk to them about their career and how fucking angry they are going to work every day, hating what they do every day. I'm like, man, you are so much farther ahead of me in financial means, but you sound depressed. And in no way do I feel like depressed with what I do. There's certainly
And their
challenges.
bodies hurt.
Oh,
Like I train so many people who are, like mid-level manager, they have a lot of extra money to spend. They have a lot of job security, but they come into me and they have like really tight shoulders, like their shoulders are rounded in, they're uncomfortable, like they have tight hips, they're overweight, and they are basically tied to their desks all day. They don't feel good in their bodies. And maybe they do find what they need in their career. Like, I don't want to make negative assumptions because they chose a different path than I did, but I just think that it's ridiculous that as a society that that's the norm.
couldn't agree more. There's definitely always going to be a spectrum of people who can handle the inner office working for other people to those who are actually just quietly miserable. And it can be in any realm of work. And it's not easy to work for yourself. It's still not. It's not easy to chase that carrot forever. But there's a huge reward that comes along with it, right? It's that thing that you're talking about, chasing a passion, the showing up and chasing a work that you feel like you've accomplished something. To be the way that you describe those two spectrums, from wanting to cry at work and just not wanting to be into like, this is now the lighting up my day to be able to go do this. Doesn't feel like work, right? At that point, it feels like just just such a valuable thing. It feeds your soul. The best, there's a couple really good perspectives that I've had for knowing if you're on the right trajectory of a career path. The one that was my very first one was like, if I'd be willing to do it for free, figure out a way to get paid. Like that's where I started with training. I was willing to do it for free. I was like, this is something I could just do every day for sure, because it just comes natural to you to be able to show someone something that you're excited about. That's a really fun thing. And another really big thing is to think of flow state of losing sense of time. Like you're not concerned about it. You're only concerned about being present in the task. And if you're present in the task, that's where you get the fulfillment of the exact moment. That's being in the moment. That's the best part of life. And so those are two really big indications. And then I heard recently a guy that I interviewed on here, and he had said, if time wasn't an issue and judgment wasn't an issue, well, how would you want to spend your life? And I thought those two were really good, real powerful questions to team up side by side. If money didn't matter and no one's judgment mattered, what would you do with your life? And he kind of says that's a really good sign of where your purpose is. And so I feel like you and I are quite similar in that, and finding what we're doing. There's still going to be elements of our job that we don't always want to do in order to accomplish that. But at the same time, to find that passion, I think is really cool. And I'd love to dive into another thing you said there that was really powerful. And I think it's an important topic, is looking the part of a trainer, because it's super important for people to understand the spectrum of fitness. So I want you to go a little deeper on that as well, if you can. What do you think people don't understand about fitness, or what do they need to appreciate when it has to be like looking the part of being fit?
So I think a lot of people's exposures to personal trainers are, like reality TV. Like they'll watch a show like The Biggest Loser and see like a trainer like Jillian Michaels with like, ab veins showing, and think that's what a personal trainer is. A personal trainer is the fittest person in the room, fittest looking person in the room. And if I'm not that, then I can't lead other people. But my mindset has shifted a lot, and I realized that it's really about leading by example. So most of the time you will, so you'll look kind of fit. You'll have like kind of a fit look about you. You'll at least look healthy if you're practicing what you preach. Because if you are eating healthy, if you're telling other people to eat healthy, you should be eating healthy. If you're telling other people to move, you should be moving. And you'll realize then that like health is a spectrum of looks. Like you can be healthy without having visible abs. You can be healthy without being a certain weight, certain size. The most important thing is if you're telling other people that they should be taking care of themselves, you absolutely should also be taking care of yourself, because otherwise you're just going to lose touch with what you're doing as a trainer. And it's going to be really hard to tell somebody else to do something if you can't do it yourself. And you're not going to really have the strategies and tactics to give people to accomplish it if you've never done it yourself.
Very well stated. The simplistic approach of, if you're not trying to take care of yourself, because you certainly can see trainers like that where you really question. It's like, okay, it's one thing to be healthy at every size, which in itself should be debated. But when you see some trainers that just look overweight, like he doesn't like, are you eating pizza every night? Are you actually trying to take care of yourself? Are you drinking on the weekends excessively? And if that coach is trying to improve themselves, then that's what makes them a good coach, because they're on the same path of trying to improve lifestyles. As you said, if anything, it's more relatable to an average person. If you want to look like a bodybuilder, that's when you get someone who looks like a bodybuilder. And I'm not going to say that the bodybuilding coaches can't help general pop, but I definitely don't believe they're the best at it, because you have one way of living. You have the system, you have the meal plan, you have the program, high volume cardio, you have your traditional approach. But if you're going to be a coach that applies to life, then you should be trying to live more of a lifestyle. You should be showing people how to include weekend treat foods with their family and friends. You should be more on the idea of steps rather than cardio. You should be including activity rather than cardio. And some of these programs I've seen for some clients that come to me where they're doing cardio, you can tell a coach really doesn't know anything about calories when they're recommending keto and fasting but no point calorie tracking and doing an hour and a half workout that is 4 sets of 8 exercises. It's like, what is the accomplishment here, right? Burn out your client to ruin your client. But
right. Yeah.
then on the other end of the spectrum, having someone who just doesn't actually know that much about fitness, maybe they're just, they're just maybe not putting in enough effort, I think would be the other end of the spectrum, someone who's not quite including it. So the way that you framed it was so good. If you're trying, you can make a good coach, right? As long as you're trying to improve yourself, you can make a good coach. And it's up to the individual. Really just try to appreciate the coach's story. That's what I always tell people. If you're going to look for a good coach, you should trust the coach. Whatever the program is, you'll know to trust the person a lot more, and make sure their story is relevant to your story in some way, because it's going to be helpful, because then they've been through the path that you're going to need to walk, and it's going to be that much more likely that they can help you. Now, I still help people gain size. Like, I don't struggle to gain size as much, but I still help people with it, and I'm still a good coach for it. But I guarantee you, someone who has come from a very lean physique and gain size might be a better coach. Just might be.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
And so it just has that context more.
Yeah, I've coached hard gainers before, and I've helped some of them see success, but honestly, with my background, I feel like that's not necessarily my specialty, and they might do better with somebody who is also a hard gainer, has a weight gain journey. I wanted to actually tell you one of my controversial opinions when you were talking about cardio. So it's not what you would expect because I'm a powerlifting coach, but I actually do love cardio, not as a weight loss tool, but I think that there's so many people who there's like this pendulum swing in the fitness industry where it's like, cardio versus weights. And it's always like, oh, do cardio, do weights. Cardio's bad, weights are bad, do Pilates. Like, I think it's so silly that we make everything mutually exclusive. And I advocate for cardio for a lot of people because of the heart health benefits. And I think that like I'm probably the power lifter that is like the biggest cardio fan of all the power lifters. Like, I know so many power lifters who are like death to cardio, but I genuinely think that I'm my best, like physically and mentally, when I'm getting in enough cardio, because there's so many people who just don't even get like the American Heart Association recommendations. And with my clients, I try so hard to not only like help them achieve the results they're after, but also help them achieve the results that they didn't know that they wanted. Like, somebody might be coming to me and be like, oh, I have a wedding coming up and I need to tone my arms, but like, I want to release them back into the world. If when their time with me is done, I want them to go back into the world healthier than they found me, with also toned arms.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I love that. Yeah, you got to make sure the toned arms are there. So I totally agree that the benefits of cardio should be overlooked beyond fat burning. Like, it's not what it's about. It's about a level of your fitness that you can enhance. And
Right.
End of the day, we know it's calories in, calories out. We do strength training so we don't lose the muscle tissue. But even then, the strength benefits are even for function, right? It's like you just want to be able to move your body well. You don't want to have bad posture at your desk. You want to do some more back muscles. You want your hips to not hurt. Make sure they're stronger. So that goes into function. And you don't necessarily need that much strength for life. You really don't need that much. But it also gives you an avenue in order to improve yourself. So that's why strength is so important. But the cardio, as you mentioned, it's the function of your cardiovascular system. It's your heart health. And
right. Yeah.
it's literally part of how you deliver oxygen to your body. So having that at a better standard is just going to make you feel better. I'd be curious to know, and you're right, that there's this pendulum swing on zone 2 coming back, because before zone 2 was just like, it's the fat burning zone, but now it's like, actually, it's kind of the heart health zone. And, high intensity interval training got a lot of the light because, it burns so many calories. And it's like, it's not really that big of a deal. It's, again, more about heart health. It's about having a good capacity. I'd be curious of your protocol. What do you believe most people should have? And there could be more specificity, because I know you want to work with some powerlifting athletes, some general pop. What's kind of your rough protocol for the average person who, say, wants to have toned arms and get in good shape?
So the average person, I look at how much cardio and how much activity they're already getting. I look at how much time they have. And then I try to go off of basically like the American Heart Association's guidelines. So it's 75 minutes of intense or moderate, or I think it's 150 minutes of, it could be 120. I usually have it in my notes, but there's also low intensity options. And if there's a blend, it can be somewhere between there for minutes. So I always encourage people to just be active as much as possible. I don't necessarily assign cardio like a bodybuilding coach would. So before, when you were talking about bodybuilding coaches, a lot of the time they'll give people like a rigorous protocol where they're doing a certain number of minutes. That's not generally what I do. Most of my clients are lifestyle clients, and I just have them, do an amount of cardio that's healthy. I have them start or finish their workout with some cardio, because my goal is just basically to make them feel good, help them drop some fat. And I always ask them about it because some people take it to the extreme. So I've had people start and they're very black and white thinking, and they'll start with me and go from doing no activity to doing an hour of cardio after their lift. And I have to explain to them why that might not be the best idea, because they might get extra hungry and eat beyond what they've burned, basically. And they might be just like burning their bodies out and like not feeling great. And that's not the goal. So I try to temper helping people meet the recommendations with like meeting them where they are, and basically like average it out, like kind of go help them bridge that gap between where they currently are. If they're not doing any activity, I'm not going to say, well, actually, you should be doing like 2 hours a week of cardio. I'm going to help them get in the cardio where they can. Say, like, do you have kids? Do you have a dog? Well, get out for a walk with them. Or you enjoy cycling? Maybe hop on the bike for 20 minutes twice this week. I don't remember where I heard this, but another strategy that I really love is the 10-20-30 rule. So I'll have people go for a 10-minute walk once a day, a 20-minute walk once a day, and a 30-minute walk once a day. And for somebody who has like a decent amount of time, but it's like broken up throughout the day, that gets them an hour of walking, and it can be hugely impactful for heart health and weight loss. So that's another thing that I give.
Yeah.
Basically, I just want, sorry.
No, keep going.
Basically, like, I just want to help people weave activity into their lives in as seamless a way as possible, because I know that not everybody loves exercise. So I want to help them lower that barrier to entry and basically make it friendly for them, because I don't want them to feel like to have a good workout, they have to be in the gym and it has to look a certain way.
I love how you ended with that as well. The fact that it doesn't have to look the way that you traditionally think is actually the most important thing, that it doesn't look that way. To me, that's why I'm big on a step count. I really hammer home the step count. And I was curious about like what your kind of consideration for cardio is, because some people look at, it could be high intensity interval cardio, it could be on a bike in steady state. Some people going for a brisk walk can hit zone 2. It can even hit a little bit higher for someone who's really out of shape. But that's why, like, to me, that's the low barrier entry for all my clients, is like, get your 10K. And if you're a busy family person, I've even lowered that standard to 8. Like, if you can hit 8, then, you got kids, you're doing stuff, right? I'm not worried about you not moving enough. It's when we're hitting below that 8 steps in a day that we're just sitting. I always call them metabolic prisons, as offices, right? Because metabolically, you're imprisoned by your circumstances. Like, this is bad for your metabolism to just sit here and do nothing. But you're also like, very stressed at whatever your job is. You're kind of white knuckling it all day, and you're there for 8, 9, 10, 12 hours. Then you're actually going to be too tired to even do anything, ironically. So it's a hell of a metabolic prison. But to be able to say, so the 10, 20, 30, I like that. What I usually say is just 10 spurts a day. And, for myself, it always worked really well. You fit it in where you can fit it in. And it's morning, noon, and night. What can you do in the morning to make it so you get a little bit more steps? We can do it afternoon to get a bit more steps, because it's going to help you midday to get an activity break that actually can get rid of your need for feeling like you need to sleep. Go for a walk. It disappears. And then in the evening, when you want to actually just finish off your day, digest your food, go for another walk. And especially teaming up around meals is anyone who has an issue with, like, let's say they're pre-diabetic or diabetic, that's going to help them control the blood sugar that much better. So these are ways that it can fit in. And I love that you hit that, because it has to be that way of looking at it. Some people don't even realize their sports cardio. It's like, oh yeah, I do Frisbee or I do this or that. I'm like, that's activity. Like you're doing the right thing. Like, you know, I get some people who are like, oh yeah, I got hockey like 2 or 3 times a week. It's like, okay, that's enough there. Like we don't need to do more than that. So I love that you hit that on. I'd be really curious to, let's dive into some of your other previous exercise history. What distance running was a very interesting one. I did a little bit of it, dabbled in it myself. What got you into distance running, and what made you want to transfer out of distance running?
So, two things. So, first of all, I thought that running was going to help me lose weight, which it did not. It did make me healthier. But the other thing was honestly, like, I was so stressed and anxious from engineering school because I didn't know it at the time. I thought I was just, stupid because I didn't feel good studying what I was studying, but it was the wrong major for me and it was the wrong path for me. And I had like a huge amount of like pent up anxiety inside my body. And the only thing that would ever get that out was running. And over time, like my reasons changed. I still actually run, just not long distances. But over time, I met groups of people who also ran and we became friends and we'd run together. So my reasons have changed, but really distance running was just a personal challenge. Like I really wanted something to focus on that wasn't school, that wasn't work. And I really wanted to just see what my limits were because my whole life I'd felt unathletic. I wanted to see if I could run a marathon because I thought that was like an ultimate feat. And I did it twice because the first one, I guess I forgot how painful it was. So now I don't run marathons anymore. I'm considering running a fall half marathon. My favorite distance to run is 10K. I usually, on like a weekly basis, will run about like 15 to 20 miles, not all at once, like throughout the course of the week. Because I really think that running gives me a lot of mental clarity and it helps me get outside. And then lately it's been like kind of a bonding activity because I've met a bunch of other women from my gym who also run. So we've been hanging out and running races together. So really it's more of like a soul thing than a body thing. But I'm sure that it's also great for my health. Like I know that running's great for lifters because being more conditioned helps you recover quicker. It helps you have energy throughout a meet if you're a competitive powerlifter. And basically, like it's just, good for you in a lot of different aspects. So that's why I keep it in.
Absolutely. You hit on a lot of the major points. I love people hearing both parts of these messages. So it's important for people to appreciate you don't do running for fat loss. You do it for activity during your fat loss journey, but it is not going to help you burn the body fat. And sometimes it's like, I think it's like a heartbreaking thing to see someone who just starts running just for that one reason.
Mhm.
And then they don't strength train, they don't pay attention to the nutrition, or they kind of do, but they don't really get into it enough. And then, the running is eventually going to burn them out because it's a high impact thing, especially if you're not really
Right.
new to it, you're new to it. But all the other benefits that you highlighted is what people should value that are interested in it. When you don't feel like an athlete, pretty low barrier to entry to put one foot in front of the other for a while, right? So you can start to learn to run without feeling like an athlete. And I think that's why so many people do find interest in it, is it feels like a bit of an athletic endeavor to say, hey, I'm going to do a half marathon or 10K or something. And you're just doing it because other people are doing it at the same time. Like it just gives you something to work towards. And if you don't have a sport that does that for you, running is such a simple way to do it. And as you mentioned, all the heart health benefits, it's great for cardiovascular system. But the mental resiliency from it by far is my favorite part. When I did my first half was probably one of the most painful, but just because I had some injuries going into it. But my first full was just such a good mental resilience thing. Like just don't stop moving your feet. Don't stop moving your feet for almost 5 hours. And then my second half was the hardest physical experience of my life because it was just under 2 hours because I wanted to break my 2 hour mark. And it's just struggling to breathe. like for 2 hours. And if you look at my heart rate monitor, I took a photo, a screenshot of it, and my heart rate was in like 170, like red zone for literally an hour and a half. And my brother even looked at it, he's like, you shouldn't have been able to do that. But like I was actually doing some training to get me used to the high tolerance of being able to handle high intensity. But that was just mental will. Like I'd never want to run fast like that again. I knew that is not my thing. As my brother loves fast, long distance runs. But I think it's valuable for people to look at it as like a form of activity that you can get excited about, but it is only going to be a feature of a program. It is not the best way to lose weight. It can be one of the most detrimental ones, as you may or may not have had experience with other clients. I know for myself, I gained weight getting ready for my marathon because I had to actually accommodate the calories that I'm consuming. And that's like one of the hardest things to titrate. It's like, you're going to be like, okay, in 2 days, I'm going to burn this many calories. And you think it's even like a lot, but it's actually just a little bit more. And you want to fill up your muscle glycogen, your muscle store sugar, so that you don't run out of energy during that run, which means you literally have to be okay with likely putting on body fat in the next couple of days. And then you're probably not even going to compensate that much on that one day. And you're going to feel so hungry because you just ran for hours.
And I don't know about you, but my NEAT would go way down too, for sure, because I would like go for a long run and then like I'd want to lay on the couch for the rest of the day. Like you run like, like 18 miles for like your like marathon preparation long runs, and you're not doing anything else that day. I would like lay on the couch with my laptop and like watch something, and I probably was like on par with other days with my calorie burn because like I was not getting up for anything except to get food and go to the bathroom.
And that's what people don't realize so much about exercise and fat loss. Your body is going to compensate the non-exercise activity. Like it just compensates. So you might have a little bit at the start where, hey, you got more output, and then eventually your body just knows how to make that like a balance. It knows how to bring it down. And that's why it's like we're saying like, hey, if you like running, include running, but maybe include the thing that's most sustainable for you for a long period of time. And that way it's like, a step count is just hard for your body to create a metabolic adaptation to if you maintain that step count very effectively. And so it's valuable for people to know that you're going to get you can get community, as you mentioned, people to run with, mental resilience, better cardio, all those things are great, but it's not a faster fat loss. It has to be for the enjoyment and the physical benefits, not the fat loss benefits, because it's one of the worst things. And so
and you can get all those things from walking too. Like 100%. You can find a community with walking. Like, honestly, I think I run because I like to be in pain. I like to like exert myself and like feel that feeling of like pushing my limits. But I think if somebody doesn't like that, they definitely shouldn't be running. Like they should walk or go on the elliptical or like do an exercise bike or something, but definitely don't run if you don't like it.
Yeah, or even just like find a form of find your form of sprinting that you can enjoy. Because again, we still want those heart health benefits of something, but maybe a slow, steady state run of you struggling to breathe ain't the right one. It's like, do you like biking? And maybe you do bike sprints. Maybe you could even just do incline walking, make the incline fast and hard for a bit and come back down. Maybe it could be rowing, but doing something really vigorous and fast, and then taking long breaks, because that's a way that you can challenge that real hard cardio system, but giving yourself the breaks so that you can push it really hard. Try a sport like boxing, try any sort of sport that's going to make it more about the movement rather than you just looking at a clock, right? That's that intrinsic motivation of sport. But I totally agree with you when it has to do with enjoying that challenge. When I do more bodybuilding, just like kind of just building, and I'm not doing the cardio because you actually don't want to take away from those calories too much. I miss that. I miss that adrenaline rush, because I always say that high intensity interval cardio is an adrenaline rush because you are near death. You're at near max heart rate. Like that's maximal. Your heart's trying as hard as it fucking can. And so that is a life organ that once you're done that, you're like, whoa, I survived. I always told my clients when I did, some high intensity cardio in my boot camps to be like, oh man, I'm dying, I'm dead. It's like, no, it's near death, because that's going to be harder to kill you. Like that's actually how you're training. And I really love all the things you're saying about running, because I think it's valuable for people to appreciate. And so your transition into powerlifting is a really cool transition, because I actually had a client come to me for running, I showed her, I'm like, hey, we're going to get you strong for this run. By the time she finished, her run was easy. And she's like, I'm getting into powerlifting. I love this stuff. This is way simpler, way easier. I see results better. And once she left me, she was getting ready for learning all her deadlift, squat, and bench. She loved it. So I'd love to know, your experience in powerlifting. And are you currently doing some right now?
Yeah, so I actually just competed almost exactly a month ago in Connecticut States. Um, so that was exciting. I am currently competing. I'm currently, up to date on my coaching certification. And basically, I started powerlifting because I, again, was curious about pushing the boundaries of what I could do. Um, I watched a lot of Meg Squats videos on YouTube, and she used to compete in powerlifting, and I watched some of her powerlifting style training videos, and I bought her program and started doing like powerlifting style training, and I realized I really like the big three lifts. I love feeling strong. I also feel like it's almost a full circle moment for me because I started fitness because I wanted to get small and lose weight. And then I decided that that doesn't really matter quite as much anymore. Obviously, I still, care about body composition, but I started thinking more in terms of like, how can I be more? How can I do more? Rather than like, how can I be less? And that is really what makes me love powerlifting because, especially as women, like for women, I think that it's really important to think like, how can I be more? How can I add more? How can I be stronger, become bigger, like take up more space? It's not really the norm that you see, especially the way that fitness is marketed towards women. Um, so I really like kind of being counterculture in that aspect. And I like what it does for my self-esteem. Like there's nothing that feels better than ripping a huge deadlift off the ground, you know? Like that is just an amazing feeling. And like nothing can take that away from you. Nobody can tell you like you didn't actually do that. Cause there are a lot of things like appearance wise is very subjective. Like somebody could be like, like you don't actually look that great. Or you could even like say that to yourself in the mirror. You can be looking at yourself and have maybe just hit what you thought was a milestone on the scale or like, waist size. And you look in the mirror and you're like, oh, I actually don't like this. But you can't take those accomplishments away from yourself when you finally, bench that number. You say like, like I did that. There's no like it's completely black and white where it's like either you did it or you didn't. And that's what I like about the sport of powerlifting as well, is that there are all these technical standards to kind of keep it kosher with all the lifts so that people can't like, cheat their way through them. Cause I've seen also people who like will have like gym PRs where they're maybe quarter squatting or maybe they're not really touching their chest with the bench. So I also like that in the sport, there are all these technical standards and there are refs to enforce them. And I think it's such a beautiful sport and I think more women should do it.
Couldn't agree more. I really love that. It is the weight no one can take you from you. And you get to own that. You get to own that accomplishment that you've done. It's a great perspective, right? It's like what you can physically accomplish is hard proof in the numbers.
Mhm.
You can get so caught up in because it's a qualitative thing, right? It's a subjective eye of what looks good, right? Because that can depend on the person, depend on what you think that day, what how you're holding your digestion. Some days your digestion you don't feel as bloated, so you're like, yeah, I look kind of good in the mirror. You had a heavier meal, it's like, oh man, I can't feel so. Like you can make that your own decision based on what you saw on social media that day. And people
Mhm.
can do the same assumption to you, project their own thoughts onto you. But everyone has to realize, like, hey, that weight is that weight, and you did it. And like you said, in powerlifting, you at least have a standard of it. And I love that you point out the quarter squats and the half rep bench. Still has its issues with debating things, because you'll still have the wider grips on the bench or the sumo versus conventional, but they standardize it the best they can in the sport to at least make it a legitimate, athletic endeavor. And I think it's probably one of my favorites because of the simplicity of it. And because if you can follow the routine of the path, you're going to get strong. It's just not even a
Mhm.
question. Of all the athletic things, athleticism takes a great deal of physical intelligence that you might not be gifted in, right? So say you want to be a boxer, and I'm a boxing coach. So there's some people I work with. I'm like, you're just not going to be a good boxer. You might be a good fighter. You might fight your way best you can. You might put up some battles, but you're just not going to have the physical intelligence that it takes to get far in the sport. Even though they're going to be rocky and say, I want to go far, I want to go pro. Now, if someone and that person can follow a plan, they can just get to work and do it. That person that can just follow the plan, get to work, follow the methodology, has a very good chance of doing very well in the sport of powerlifting. There's still going to be genetic dispositions. There's always going to be genetics, probabilities. The first physical features, longer limbs aren't always good for powerlifting, but you have so much more control in the process because it's a process-oriented sport. And so you can actually control that result way better. And I know from coming from boxing, even doing long distance running and bodybuilding, but I would say powerlifting for sure. You tell me if you agree or disagree. Isn't it kind of like almost mentally easier? Because yes, it's very intense in the moment, but I would rather do a very intense powerlifting workout than run for an hour. You even mentioned it's like you do the run because it's hard. You push yourself through that. But I know personally, it's like, hey, I got to count my reps. I take a break. I do some mobility. I get to count some reps again. And yes, it's intense and it is hard, but I prefer those spurts of intensity over a long duration, kind of battling to breathe, so to speak.
Depends on the day for me, honestly. Sometimes I just get the bar on my back and it feels really heavy, and it takes a lot of mental mastery because you can slog through a super long run, but when you have like almost 300 pounds on your back and you have to do a couple reps with it, like it's really hard to not get that anxiety of, like, what if this crushes me? Like, what if I hurt myself? I feel like in other sports, like you can kind of like half-ass it, but in powerlifting, it's like you either do it or you don't. And, when you're nearing those maximal efforts, you really can't give less than everything. Like you really have to like summon that energy. You have to find it within yourself and you just have to do it. And I love that about it, but also sometimes that is really, really difficult to do, if you're a little distracted. Like you really have to be focused. There are other sports where you can like, not really have your best game and not play your best, like especially team sports, but like you can still win the game. And powerlifting, like you either bring it on meet day or you don't, which is another thing that I kind of love is that for a while I was like confused as to why powerlifting is a sport. Like I looked at it initially and I was like, okay, like I'm gonna pay like $100-something to test my maxes in front of a bunch of people. But then my third meet, there was another girl who I was kind of like neck and neck with, and there was a lot of strategy and a lot of like, it's not necessarily choosing like your heaviest lift. It's about like beating the person who you're neck and neck with for number one. So sometimes you can lift heavier, but you might go like 2.5 kilograms under what you thought was going to be your max because you want to reserve energy for another lift. So there's the strategy element of it too. And the whole, like, you don't know how meet day is going to play out. You don't know, like, if you're going to wake up and feel a little dehydrated and like have kind of a crappy day. And you don't know if you're going to wake up and have like the strongest day of your life. So it's exciting, but it's also mentally really, really tough. And it's also like a chance to really hone your skills when it comes to tuning out life's distractions.
Absolutely. You have to tune it out. Like you got to think about nothing but that lift. It's funny because like during my ramp up sets when I'm getting ready for doing like a heavy lift, I can listen to a podcast. But if I'm listening to the podcast when I'm doing the heavy set, like that's not a good set. Like there's no way it is, right? Because
yeah, I can't hear my music when I'm lifting.
No, you got to be zoned in, like you say, absolute intensity. And that's a very good point that like, I suppose I do a lot of sub-maximal loading too, but it does require this ability to get over a fear of this is a dangerous weight that you're holding, especially when you talk about the squat. The squat's like the scariest one to me. A deadlift is like you can choose whether or not to pull that off the ground. A bench press, I personally don't. I do the no clip system, and you could have a spotter. But for sure, it's scary to have that weight on your back. You have to brace. You have to be in the moment, and it requires like. It's funny because people don't know what heavy is. Like so many people don't. And I know some people who push heavy so much that it took me years to appreciate, literally in the last couple of years, like, oh, wow, people are really afraid of heavy. But I haven't been afraid of heavy because I've just, always push and hurt myself in the process. So that, like, I didn't appreciate so many people are afraid of that story so much that they're not even afraid. They're like so afraid to go even close to it. Like, a lot of people are afraid to come even close to that. So it is a very valid point that if you're going to get into something like that, like, you have to be okay with what real heavy is. But I think that's a really cool story. And I want to hear, because you said 300 pounds on your back, and that is damn heavy for a female. So I'm really curious, where are your numbers, if you don't mind them sharing them?
So my comp maxes right now. So the lifts that I've pulled in competition, my gym PRs in certain lifts are a little bit higher, but my squat max in competition is 291. My bench max in competition is 148. I know I could push a lot heavier than that, but I got disqualified on my last bench because I imagined the command in my head. So that was a little bit disappointing. And then my deadlift comp max is 330. So yeah. I mean, it makes me feel really good.
Yeah.
No, but like also like I have so much room to grow. Like I try not to compare myself to other people online. Like that's the other hard part of lifting and following other power lifters is like you see these people who are pulling like insane things, but again, you don't know their story. You don't know like what their life looks like if it's arranged around training. So I try to just kind of like keep focused on myself.
Super important that you have that, because online, it's so easy to feel like insignificant, like what you're doing isn't really good. It has to be you versus you. And you can even go you versus the person next door. Like, most people around you aren't even fucking close. You are physically stronger than a lot of guys I know, most guys I know. And so for you to have that kind of strength, but then when we go on social media, here's the problem with it. You get to see the most extreme things because it's the most entertaining. It's like seeing all these people with great physiques. So you think there's a lot of people with good physiques. That is not even 1% of the population. It's not even, right? But it's most of what you see on their social media. And the same thing with powerlifting. And I've heard this even said from powerlifters. They're like, yeah, like 10, 20 years ago, it was rare to see a 900-pound squat. It was rare to see 500, 600-pound bench press. And now it's like boys are doing it. The guys in the 20s are doing it. And it's just like, especially with the gear, like people can do even more often. And you don't know who's on gear and who's not, like who's actually on PEDs. So it becomes an unfair game to try to compare yourself to others. And you always have to have that. I got to push my best. I always got to slowly climb my best. And powerlifting game is a slow build. It is the slowest build. People don't appreciate that. It's like, you can go powerlifting. You can do powerlifting a long time and make it healthy. But I think it's those who are trying to rush it and try to hit PRs super fast in it that are going to burn out, right? That are going to have that sport do them a disservice. I always love hearing the type of people who don't know their one rep maxes. It's like, I don't know, but I know what I did for 2. I know what I did for 3, because they follow their program so well that they're not concerned with trying a PR of just a 1 rep that's probably shit form, right? If you know like only what you do in competition and you know your 2 or 3 rep max because it was good form, that tells me that you're training appropriately, right? Because the rest of the stuff is probably just ego lifting anyway. So, but I love all this information. I think you got some really cool information here. The fact that you're a powerlifting coach and that you're getting more into it. Why don't you tell the listeners where they can find more about you?
So my Instagram is strong.with.sam. I post nutrition and training tips and also my own journey, especially powerlifting stuff. And then my website where I post my articles is strongwithsam.fit. So feel free to check that out. I'm hoping to post another one this week. I don't know when this podcast is coming out, so there'll hopefully be another one up by then.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate you having me on. This is my first podcast I've ever been on, if you can't tell by my rambling, but this was a great experience and very exciting.
Oh, I'm glad you came on. You did great, very well. I think you got a great story to tell. So it's been really fun. And I'd love to know, because it's a Strong Ambition podcast, what's your most recent ambition? It could be work, life, personal, anything that you're really excited. What's coming down the pipeline for you?
So I have a work and a personal. So my personal is renovating a duplex that was built in the 1930s. My fiance and I are DIY renovating it. So that has been really ambitious, big undertaking. My work ambition is I have a client who is currently trying to lose 100 pounds. He's 350 pounds and he wants to get down to about 250. And he's kind of been, I've been pouring a lot of energy into trying to help him execute because he's very smart. And he's been planning. And I'm like, you got to get here and you got to execute. So we've been working on that. And that's been one of my recent ambitions.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you went specifically to a client. I know that, like, when you're excited to work with a certain client, it's like, hey, I'm going to make a big difference for you. And also having a client that's going to be like, it seems like they got all the plans, but they actually get them in action is the hard part. But and that sounds so cool. Renovating, you said 1930s.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's really cool. That. I'm excited to see it. You're gonna have to send me some photo before and afters of that. My
Yeah.
girlfriend will love it. She's very big into old architecture, so I think that'll be really exciting. But I love having you on here, and I'm excited to hear more about this stuff. So I'm certain I'll reach out in the future. We'll do another podcast. We'll talk more about powerlifting. We'll go into more of that stuff, and I'm hoping to do my first powerlifting meet very soon here. So I'll have more to dive in because I'll have more relevance. I'll have more experience actually.
Yeah. Let me know how that goes for sure.
Absolutely. But thank you so much, Sam. I really appreciate you coming out. This is a really fun chat.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thanks again to Sam. I really enjoy hearing her story. It was a lot of fun because I actually didn't know any of this about her ahead of time. I knew she was into powerlifting, but hearing how she evolved as a person, it's always the most exciting thing to me. And I always feel for people who came from being overweight and having to battle with that in some way, I do believe makes you a stronger person for what you need to do later on in life, no matter where you come from. If you come from a place you don't want to be and you go to a new place because you work hard to get there, that's an important story. And I certainly reside with the people who come from being overweight. And for her to make the classic idea of just, yeah, let's just run to lose weight. But I was glad that we were able to shed light on run because you want to run, because you get something out of running. You don't have to. You can actually just walk. You can find so many other forms of activity. But if running is one of those pursuits that is something that you get out of being in that moment, that you get more than just doing it for the sake of fat loss, you really shouldn't do it for fat loss. You should do it for all the other benefits. And it will be something you do while you're losing body fat. It shouldn't be the true passion that you're going after. As we even mentioned, it's a terrible idea to think you're going to lose weight if you're going after a marathon. By no means. It might be a bit of a notion that people take because they see a lot of very small, lean runners, but they're lean when they started running. So that's not, because it's kind of a bias, right? You think that that's the way that it is when you run, but it's more so they are made for running and they're already lean. So don't make that assumption. But it was a really cool thing to hear her sit on that fixed mindset right off the bat. It's like, hey, I had a fixed mindset. I thought this is the way it was going to be. So many people don't realize that that's not the way it has to be. And so to hear that transition, you just need a little education. You can literally grow as a person. You grow your muscle. You want to run more, run more. You want to get stronger, do strength, right? And it's a value for everyone to realize that that's any element of your life. Anything can be grown, anything. The world of plasticity in the mind and in the body is, no, I'm not going to say endless, but it is far more vast than people give themselves credit for. And I thought it was really cool that she came from engineering. As I mentioned, my friend came from engineering, and that's fucking hard to do. And to hear her story about how she would cry at work because she knew it wasn't what she wanted to do, but then she found this light in her life, that's super powerful. That's super potent. And I hope you're not someone who has those circumstances, but to appreciate that that can happen to people. And, hearing her story about how she transitioned out of it, it even makes me feel more confident about the direction that I chose, because there are still certain hard times in this career to make it very successful. But to know that that purpose, that overall calling, is so much more valuable. And for her to really discuss about looking the part of a trainer is this has come up many times in the podcast recently, is that we got to see fitness on a whole spectrum. You got to look. You don't have to look a specific part, and you shouldn't think that you need to look a certain part. You want to look your best, and you define that version of your best. And a lot of the people who've even talked about this in the past is like, I've been leaner. It's like, but did they enjoy the lifestyle and the tools they used to get leaner? No. It's like the leanest I ever was the bodybuilding show. For sure, that's not the best I ever felt, but horrible. Like, that's literally the idea of getting on stage. And I'd say right now, I feel great. And I have far more body fat on me. I would argue that's a healthy standpoint to have, right? And so even whether it's looking at the part of a trainer or looking at the part of a fit person, it's something for everyone to value. And I hope you really appreciate the mindset around powerlifting. I think everyone should consider something like it. Now, I'm not saying everyone needs to do the big three. I think everyone should try to find a form of strength training they get excited for, though. I'm biased. I'm not saying I'm 100% right and everyone has to, but I do think everyone should. Because, and notice I said a form of strength training. It could be calisthenics, right? It could be, I'm going to get really good at my dumbbell weights. Don't just do your dumbbell weights, you do them. Do them to get good at them, to make sure you're hitting PRs on them each and every week. If you only have dumbbells, then we should be hammering a bunch of Bulgarian split squats, and you should be hitting PRs on those split squats because you should be strong enough to be able to gobble squat weight eventually. And it shouldn't be enough weight. Usually people should get to a strength where your upper body isn't as strong as your lower body, basically. And if you're doing a goblet squat, and it's still hard on your legs, that means your legs are going to get stronger. But you should get to a point where then it's just split squats. And get excited about getting good at those split squats. Get excited about that stuff. Now, that's why I say find a form of strength. Maybe you're like, I really like machines. I get excited for them. Then get excited for them. Track that number. Get good at it. But as both of us mentioned, it's no one can take that weight away from you. When you hit PRs, it's your PR. And it's always you doing better than you. And it's amazing. As I mentioned on the episode 2, that I had a client that completely changed her value for running because she started running and she's like, actually, I like lifting more. And you can get that excitement, but you have to be curious about it. You have to be curious about it. So I hope you learned a lot from this episode. I think there's a really cool story here on transitioning a mindset above all else in a way of life, for sure. And I hope that is something that you can take with you. And some really good key messages for how you can evolve your own fitness and your own nutrition. I'll certainly have her on again. I do recommend you check out her channel. She's got great stuff for powerlifting and nutrition and training. And thank you so much for, following. And don't forget to please like and subscribe, leave a review, anything to help this little podcast move forward. Share it with a friend, because that's how we spread the word and help more people, because it's all about helping people go after their own ambitions, go after the things that they are excited for, because it's the best part of life, right? It's not about the pursuit of happiness, my friend. It's about the happiness within your pursuit. And I'll catch you next time.